Welcome into a new edition of the Going Deep Buffalo podcast. As always, I'm your host, Kevin Massare. For a very special edition, we have a ton to talk about today, and we'll have even more to talk about next week. But first and foremost, Kevin, how you doing today?
I am still in shock, Kevin. That was one crazy afternoon, as it started with the Sabres trading Casey Middlestat to the Colorado Avalanche, and I thought that was a lot. And then we had a whole slew of Bills transactions, as I will add now on the bottom here. So you will see these scroll through. And these were not all today, but these were over the last few days here, and it has been crazy to say the least.
Yeah, did not expect him to come fast and furious like that. I'll admit it. I would have expected maybe like we did with McGovern, maybe one here, one there to kind of clear up cap space that way. I didn't expect Beane to just be like Wednesday, March 6th to put through every single transaction that he had going on. It was kind of a wild scenario where, you know, we had a great couple of graphics for you on what we thought Brandon Beane may do throughout this period, what we want him to do, a couple free agent targets that are more realistic now. We have a lot of free agent targets we're going to go through with some money that the Bills have now found. But I did not expect about 10 transactions to go through and a couple of big ones. So I projected the Bills to have about $30 million. I'll show you guys throughout the show how about $30 million to go shopping with. But they're going to have more. So a lot of the things that happened, the Bills have cut players that I thought that they would only do extensions to, potentially maybe even just pay cut a little bit, but they got the full benefit there. So the Bills are going to be around $50 million to the positive. They aren't right now at this minute, but they haven't even done any of their big deals. And we're going to go through those and more. But we're going to talk about, originally, we're going to talk about the moves that did happen so far. And then we're going to put it all together with some moves that I have that I do think the Bills still make as we go forward here. But first and foremost, come with a couple of the shock. I had Saran Neal being cut. You'll see that in my my upcoming projection. I had Deontay Hardy getting cut, Nyheim Hines getting cut. So those are a couple of the ones that we did have already projected. Those ones did come to fruition. The Bills have saved about $36 million today, Kevin. So we're going to start there. Like, they're basically close to even based on where you look. I have them still a little bit over the cap at the moment, especially because Trey White's $10 million is going to come off the cap on June 1st, which is, guess what happens then? Some June 1st shopping. Guess when they signed Leonard Floyd last year on June 1st. So around June 1st, about June 10th exactly. So there definitely is going to be a situation that after the draft, whatever they don't nail, I do expect a medium tier free agent to come in to supplement their roster at that point. And that's going to be fun as well based on how the market goes. But Kevin, how are you feeling? Let's going to talk about Jordan Poyer, Nyheim Hines. How are you feeling? Anything that jumps out to you? Trey White, Mitch Morse. So Mitch Morse saves about $10 million alone. Did not project that one in my projections. So what are you feeling about? Give me some of your feels quickly, and then we'll get into some of the numbers and what they're going to do.
Man, I mean, I don't know where to start. I mean, I guess the place that I'll start is that these guys were pillars. Trey White was the first draft pick by Sean McDermott. Brandon Beane wasn't part of that draft. It was Doug Whaley. So Trey White was one of the first draft picks, or he was the first draft pick. Jordan Poyer was one of the first free agents signed. Mitch Morse has been here for 5 years, and he has been that stable leader on the offensive line, anchoring down that offensive line, helping Josh Allen really mold into the Josh Allen that we know and love today. So the Bills lost a lot of talent, a lot of experience, and a lot of leadership. And it's a really, really tough pill to swallow. And I felt really upset, angered, and just I had so many different emotions going on because it's like, okay, I trust Brandon Beane. He's done this before, and I know that he knows what he's doing, but it's just really, really tough to see guys like that go, especially with Jordan Poyer. We thought, okay, you're going to lose Micah Hyde. That's already enough right there. Pair Jordan Poyer with a free agent or a rookie, and then we can give Poyer the proper send-off next year, and then he can ride off into the sunset. So I wasn't mentally prepared to say goodbye to Micah Hyde and Jordan Poyer. So that was a very, very tough pill to swallow. And then they just kept coming in. I was trying to keep up with Twitter and Instagram, and it's like, okay, now you have Mitch Morse. Now Trey White, Deontay Hardy, Saran, it just did not stop. So the Bills had a slew of moves. And one thing that I'll say about the Mitch Morse one is that now reports are saying that Connor McGovern is going to be the new starting center. David Edwards, who was signed yesterday, is now going to be the starting left guard. So now you're starting to see how Brandon Beane thinks, and it does make sense. But then you look at the Ryan Bates trade, and you say, well, why would you trade Ryan Bates? I know they got a draft pick out of it. They saved about $1.5 million. And that's not that much, but every million counts. But that's where I get a little bit confused, because now it seems like the Bills could have used Ryan Bates as that swingman, because now you need a backup offensive lineman. So just a lot of different thoughts going on through my mind today. A lot of different emotions, but in the end, I do trust Brandon Beane, and I think that he did what he had to do, and now we can have a little bit of fun in free agency.
Yeah, what's really great, I think, with the Ryan Bates trade, one caught me off guard too. Notably the high fifth round pick, where around they found Khalil Shakir. So let's not sleep on what Brandon Beane can do. Brandon Beane right now is third in draft value ranking at finding draft picks. So yes, everyone's going to say, well, that is being lifted by Josh Allen. He hit on Josh Allen. Of course, he hit on a franchise quarterback. Of course, it's going to raise your draft profile. Many GMs don't hit on franchise quarterbacks. So right now, if you take away every team's franchise quarterback, then it's going to equal out, especially to teams at the top. So right now that Brandon Beane is third or fourth in draft value ranking on what he's been able to produce from his draft classes as he is evaluated against his peers. Now he has 11 draft picks. Everyone's saying he doesn't think he's going to select 8 draft picks. I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure how many of those he's going to trade away with the young, cheap contracts, especially if he's very aggressive and active in free agency in about 5 days, like I expect him to be now. And we're going to go over some of the numbers here shortly on why I expect him to be. But I expected the Bills, like I said earlier in the show, to have $30 million after a few moves. I did not have them cutting Mitch Morse or Trey White. I did not have them cutting Jordan Poyer. So a lot of the other moves were things that I expected. Von Miller, actually. So I talked about it on the show a couple of times now, Kevin, that I believe that Von Miller was in a position to have to take a pay cut. Now, a lot of people are like, he's got all the leverage. He has $10.1 million guaranteed. He's not going to ever take a pay cut. What are you talking about? What is this fictional scenario? He absolutely was. He only had a certain amount guaranteed. He was not playing to that standard. And the Bills were going to do whatever they had to do to get that money back. Most notably, they straight up asked him to take $9 million off his base salary. They're like, dude, I don't know what to tell you. You want to be a GM soon? You need to take $9 million off your payroll. And that's exactly what he agreed to. The Bills said in return, all right, I'll give you that money up front. Fine. I'll give you your entire base salary right now to your bank account. Like, I'm going to wire it. Terry Pagula is going to wire that into your bank account as soon as this paper transaction is completed. So what does that mean for the Bills? You take about what he was given today, about $7 million, and you spread that out over the next 4 years, this year included. So the Bills actually restructured Von Miller. So by that virtue of that $7 million, yes, it's a signing bonus, but that is essentially a restructure. That's like taking a base salary and spreading it out over the term of the deal. So the Bills actually kicked some money down the road today, Kevin, which further proves that the Bills think that Von Miller not only is going to be a contributor this year, but they're in a position to where they kind of think he's going to contribute at least next year. So I wanted to start there. So the Bills saved roughly $8.5 million off of Von Miller. Do you think that that's a smart move? Because he took $8 million away for him as a team, but also the Bills did spread around $7 more million into the future of the deal, roughly about kicking about 5.5 down the road that they're going to have to deal with now. Say they wanted to move on from him next year. They almost can't, because that's $5.5 million now that has been pushed into the future of money that they paid him today. So the Bills are going to be close to even on the deal. So I projected a pay cut and restructure. This was a pay cut and signing bonus, which is essentially the same thing. So are you nervous? Let's start right there with the savings there of about 8.5. Are you nervous with that 8.5 savings? Are you thinking he gets back to what he's supposed to be? Because if he's good this year, he also could make around 20 million, which is only a slight total pay cut of about the 24 he was projected. So, what is your feeling on Von Miller and what he's going to bring to the team? Because right now he's starting across from Greg Rousseau and Ed Oliver. So how are you? What's your thoughts on that?
I am a little nervous because as soon as he signed that mega contract, I saw that there was the opt-out after year 3. So I've always been under the impression that this is just a 3-year contract for Von. And now, to your point, this is going to turn into more than that 3-year contract. And we're starting to see those 6 years, $120 million come to fruition here. And I think Von can get back to playing at an elite level, but how elite can he be? I mean, this is a guy who's older than Joe Brady. Von Miller is going to be 35 years old when the season starts. Joe Brady's 34, just to put it into perspective. So how much should we actually expect out of Von this year and moving forward? And for what it's worth, I know there's different ramifications based on the contracts and dead cap and cap hits and all that. but I would rather spend that $8.5 million on Mitch Morse.
Hmm.
So, it's just, you got to give or take a little bit. And that goes back to how I open up the show, that it's just a lot of mixed emotions right now, where like sometimes I see it where it's like, okay, this is a good thing. I like how Brandon Beane is thinking. But then you look and you say, well, is it really that good? And you start to see different angles and different perspectives. And something else that we haven't mentioned yet, DeMar Hamlin's the only safety under contract right now. So as much as you want to look at it as a positive and say, okay, the Bills are going to get younger at safety and they're going to move on from Poyer and Hyde, that's a good thing, because, those guys were getting dinged up and we need to get younger and quicker, and we have to find guys who can stay healthy. Well, you're going to have to do some work, because DeMar Hamlin's the only one under contract right now. So I think it's just important that we wait and see, because there are just so many different perspectives and you can kind of make yourself go crazy. And I'm glad, let's just say this right now. This is a perfect time to have this show tonight. And I appreciate, we have over 500 people in here right now. I appreciate everyone in here. And, we were talking beforehand. Kevin and I had our free agency wish list that we were planning out.
We're going to go over it too.
Yeah. We can still go over it, but all of our numbers are thrown off. So to everyone who's in here, make sure you stay here, because we're definitely going to call on you tonight, because you can help us kind of recreate that wish list with all this new money to spend.
Yeah, as I said earlier, I thought the Bills would have about $30 million to spend. I really think it's going to end more toward 50. So Brandon Beane is not done here. He's going to add 11 draft picks to the stock with young rookie cheap deals that are going to go into the pipeline. That is going to be a useful factor. However, I think he's going to get there, and I think he's not even close to done yet. So $8.6 million wasn't a technical restructure. He took a pay cut. Okay. So part of it then, what the Bills did was to honor that pay cut. They gave Von Miller $7 million in cash in order right to his bank account. And that $7 million then gets spread out between the remaining 4 years. So that part of it's a restructure. So out of that $7 million, part of the money they saved, about half of it was in that signing bonus. So yes, that money is all pushed down the road. And a majority, if not all of his deal this year, if you're asking, is fully guaranteed. The Bills basically said, you're going to take $8 million. In return, we're going to give you cash today, and we're going to save some cap money. But it's guaranteed because he just got paid today. So, he's already been paid. So essentially all of his money is guaranteed. There's no way he'd get cut or traded now. He's on the team this year, and I'd argue he's on the team next year. Like, there may be a sneaky way that Beane has in this out, but I'd be shocked if Von Miller is not on this roster this season and next season. And if he's good, he's going to get paid a little bit more. So the Bills will have to pay a little bit more cap space at the end of the year, probably out of some of that Trey White money, if he's really good, which I don't know about you, Kevin, but I'm going to take a situation to where Von Miller is really good as a really solid sign. So the Bills did restructure Rasul Douglas as well. That is money that they took. They probably couldn't. I had them, as you'll see in my update here. We're going to go over some of our or all of our. I had a great show prepared today about what the Bills are going to do to free up money. They did it about 3 hours before the show. And I have about Kevin and I came up with throughout the course of the last couple of weeks, a bunch of free agent, budgetary, medium tier free agents that we're going to go over as well. But Rasul Douglas was one on my list that the Bills I had that they were going to not only restructure a little bit, but I had them actually extending him. The Bills probably couldn't come to terms. I have to figure Rasul Douglas played like a top 10 corner. He was asking for about $20 million, being said, not right now. Maybe we can do something down the road, but he has a couple of void years in there. So what the Bills actually did in Rasul Douglas is take his about $10 million and spread it out over the course of the remaining 3 years, 2 of them being void years. So that's what's going to happen with Rasul Douglas. And they only saved about 2.5. So it wasn't an ideal move on Rasul Douglas, but the Bills had to save money there, and they weren't quite sure what they were going to do with him. So those void years do help. So 3 years additional from this year of void years. So actually this year spread out 3 more years. So 4 years they pushed out a lot of Rasul Douglas's money. So with void years, though, there's still always an opportunity to exercise those years. So that'll tell you that Brandon Beane is hoping to get a 3-year contract extension in with Rasul Douglas at some point. So maybe they needed the money now and said, let's revisit some of this. We're going to spread out some void years. We're going to try our best to get you on the books for 3 additional years. So that's what happened with Rasul Douglas. I did not expect that to be the way they went on the restructure, especially when you only have 1 year on the deal. You'll never think of, like, I wouldn't have thought off the top of my head they're going to restructure Rasul Douglas. The most obvious answer there is an extension where you spread money out. But I think that there's still a world, because when you put those 3 years void years on, that means that the Bills are still interested in signing him for 3 years, because they can utilize those years that they've already created, fake years that they've created. So we'll see if ends up being an extension there, but I think it's possible you'll see at some point in the spring or summer, you'll see a Rasul Douglas extension. But I wanted to get to our graphic now. Please smash the like button, by the way. It's really meaningful that you're all here to talk about the Bills. Lots of huge, I mean, it's the end of an era, essentially, with some of, as you said, Kevin, with some of the additional traditional players that were going to be on this roster. I even had them on this roster. We'll see here shortly, kind of my projection and where I think the Bills will go. But I'm gonna ramp it up a little bit. We're gonna talk about some free agents as well that now I believe the Bills can target. So that's going to be the fun part of the show. But a graphic I already tweeted out here. This is what we and I thought I put together to what the Bills needed to do. So this is what the Bills were supposed to do prior to about 6 hours ago. So if you look through this, I had the Bills just a firm restructure of Josh Allen for $23 million. Hasn't happened yet. So that's going to be money the Bills are going to be able to expend here shortly in 5 days. So a Josh Allen restructure of $23 million. Now, the one thing I wanted to ask you about, Kevin, we'll get to the cuts and extend some of the stuff I had going on. Stephon Diggs. What did the Bills do with him now, knowing you don't need to push out money any longer? The only reason you would do that is to target a premier free agent, which, as we both are talking about, I think they do. However, the Bills are pretty all in on him. They've already called him their receiver one. They've already basically, what do you do with Diggs? You leave him alone now, knowing that you've actually had to make already some tough moves with Morse, with Poyer, with Trey White. So if you see my pay cut situation there, I had that situation with Von Miller. I had a Von Miller redo of $13.7 million. So I had a situation very similar to one that just happened here today. But Poyer and White are gone. So they saved more than what I have on the screen, because those are pay cuts. They got released. So this was my projected offseason. So I wanted to ask you, what do they do with Diggs? Do they do the 13.2? Do they leave it? I know we've talked about Diggs over the course of weeks, but now knowing what you know, what are you doing with Diggs?
Well, last time we talked about this, I said that I kind of want to just leave Stephon Diggs alone instead of always trying to tinker with this contract. But I believe that you said that you don't have to go to Diggs and you can just kind of rework his contract without asking him to take a pay cut. So is that still on the table where they can kind of do that without having to get Diggs' permission?
They can do whatever they want with Diggs. Yeah. So it's in his contract that they can fully make his base salary as a restructure if they please. He does not have to agree to it.
Yes. I mean, I guess I'm kind of indifferent because, again, I would have rather touch Diggs' contract and try to rework that and still have Jordan Poyer and Mitch Morse on the team, and Trey White for that matter. You know, as you saw with our pay cuts here, we thought it was more likely that those guys would rework their contracts rather than just getting outright cut. So now with all those transactions that we saw today, that kind of changes something. So I don't think it's as pressing that they work on Diggs' contract. But I mean, if you can still save that $13.2 million, then go ahead and do it. Because if that means that you can go get a wide receiver 2 in free agency, then I'm all for it. Now, I will say I do want to get that wide receiver 2 in the draft. So the way that we structured our free agency offseason wish list here, we were planning on the Bills signing a wide receiver 4, and that's what we budgeted for. So I'm just very curious to see what Brandon Beane has cooking right now. And I will say, the Bills have 11 draft picks right now. So he might be stockpiling those just to trade up in round 1 and find that stud wide receiver. So I think this is a very, very interesting conversation to have.
And also the conversation could still be had at the top with Josh Allen. Like, do you give him a style where you're going to extend him out to about a 10-year deal, give him a home style player option, or team option every single season, to where you can take that team option and spread it out over the course of a deal, similar to a restructure, but just a little bit different the way it's structured. I still think that there's some structure changes that could happen with Josh Allen's deal. Not just necessarily a firm restructure. If it's not this year, it's next year for sure. So maybe they just say right now, let's just give them the restructure. However, every year you keep kicking money down. I do think at some point they're going to have to give them the Mahomes deal so that they can always save as much money as possible on the cap and not have situations to where it keeps adding up. So by the 8th, 6th, 7th, 8th year, I mean, he'd be a ton of money if you keep restructuring him. So you have to remember Josh Allen could be a $23 million savings. There's potential for that to be more if they get witty and push out even more. You know, you're going to have him forever as long as he agrees to it like Mahomes does. He can be extended out, another 4 or 5 years past where he is. And then it can give you some ultimate flexibility there. So Josh Allen is not just a firm restructure yet, but Beane could go to him and say, hey, we're just going to restructure you this year. Even though he doesn't have to, but I'm assuming with Josh Allen, he would tell him, hey, I'm going to send you $23 million right now. That's how much that the Bills would save there. But don't forget, the Bills would pay him an entire base salary of upfront. So yes, that could be done today. I don't expect that to be done for a little while here because the Bills probably spent a little bit of money today in real cash, not cap space, giving players their upfront monies. You had McGovern, you had Von Miller get money as well. So I don't anticipate Josh Allen's getting his $23.5 million base salary plus a $6 million roster bonus being paid in cash up front. So Terry Pagula has to have $30 million in cash right now to process that transaction. So when that happens is absolutely on Terry and when he wants to duel out $30 million to Josh Allen to help the Bills cap situation. So that will happen at some point. I just don't think they may take that to the wire on that one, especially as they become cap compliant. So as we continue down, so for me, Stefon Diggs, I still restructure him. I don't think there's a realistic way out anyway. And it's kind of a Von Miller situation. I want Stefon Diggs to play his career out in Buffalo. And I think it's structured as such. So if the Bills can go out and make their roster better, they have 11 draft picks. They can save $13 million. I'd love to have a legitimate receiver 2 in Buffalo. And Stefon Diggs can actually make it happen through Brandon Beane, obviously, by restructuring his deal. It's always done by the GM. The player does not have to sign off on it. All you're doing is giving Stefon Diggs his money today up front rather than game check to game check. So that's the way that the restructures work. Players, everyone's like, oh, how nice of the guy to restructure his deal. They never have to worry about it. It'd be like if I was to give you your base salary today and say, yo, dude, you're going to be employed for a year plus. Here's your paycheck right now today. Like none of us would really have that big of an issue with it, especially when it's that amount of money that you would earn. So I think that those both get done and the Bills are going to save another $36 million, guys. Right now, I have them as a live update. I've been doing some math behind the scenes. I'm not sure if some people are saying they're at 0 right now. I'm not sure what math they're using, but I have them at about 7 million over still. And that's with every update prior to Trey White's June 1st savings. So negative 7 million at the moment. There may be something that still needs to come in that I'm not calculating. But that $36 million right there would put the Bills in a situation to where they're right always 30 million to the good right then and there. So that would bring us to the pay cuts. Well, some of these aren't going to happen. Trey White's been cut. So you're going to save, obviously, what he's already been saved, full $6 million. I don't know how worth it that's going to be, but the Bills felt like that's going to be a situation that he may not be worth even that. So they moved on from that. Jordan Poyer, I had him taking about a $2 million pay cut. The Bills saved his entire possibility of saving. So that's gone. And the Von Miller redo, I had it at 13.7. It's about 8.7. So the Bills gave him more than I thought they would, but they did give him a cut and give him a technically a signing bonus restructure. So there is a ton of money that the Bills have saved there. I just had that the maximum amount of value, which they could have done, was about 13.7. But Vaughn actually has a reasonable way to earn back money in his deal. Okay, here we got the extension section here. And this is one that's still alive, right? Douglas got a restructure. So technically Douglas should be in the restructure section. But I never would have assumed that you were going to do a 1-year deal on a restructure on Rasul Douglas. Dawkins and Johnson, those are two hot topics. And I want your opinion on it, Kevin. Dawkins and Johnson can save you some money by extending them out. Are you cool with that? Are you getting those done here over the course of the next few days?
Yes, for sure. I don't want to lose any more core pieces. I love Deion Dawkins. I love Taron Johnson. I think they're both elite at their positions. Okay. Johnson more so than Dawkins. And yeah, I'm not even thinking about that because I want to save money and I want to keep as many players as possible.
Okay, I agree with you. Dawkins is 29, has 2 void years on his deal. It's a walk year for him, but he has 2 void years, which once again, as we've already said, would project to say that the Bills are hoping to be able to keep him with those void years. Anytime you see them, the hope is that, and it's also Taron Johnson's walk year as well. The Bills it behooves them to get an all-pro re-signed. So that is our kind of the way that you would clear money. It's possible, I would say, probably for another 10 this way now. Knowing what we know now, there's about a possibility. If you look at Taron Johnson, he's going to be tougher. He's about a $6.4 million base salary. He's got a roster bonus of a $1.1 million due to him soon. So there's possibility to save about $4 million with his deal if he does get extended. So I think it's very possible by his roster bonus date, which is the 18th, you could see an extension there from him. And then similarly to Deion Dawkins, he has a $9.9 million base salary, as well as his roster bonus of $500,000 due on the 17th. So there's roughly $10 million there that the Bills can work with on his base salary. So I'm going to say there's a possibility to save about $10 million if they extend that out both ways. So the Bills could be at about $40 million right there, in a situation that I think is fairly doable. None of this is crazy at this point. They already kind of made their crazy moves. So that's what's kind of neat about this situation, that they've actually done the maximum amount of savings. This was me trying to save as much as I could to get to our projected free agency wish list here that we'll go over in a moment. But, at first we have to remember it's the end of an era, guys. Like, these are players that ended the droughts. You had Trey White, you had Jordan Poyer, they ended the drought. So that's a situation to where we're kind of moving on from those players. I think that they were core pieces. You had Mitch Morse throughout the majority of this scenario as well. But the Bills are getting younger. This is what everybody wanted them to do. So it hurts the day you do it. It just happened to come all at once. It hurts the day that it happens. But ultimately, they're going to get younger. They have a contingency in place. I overly wanted them to sign. You'll see David Edwards, and he's going to slot in as a very talented starting guard of a Super Bowl team in the past. And you're getting Connor McGovern, who looked really well. They have a starting offensive line and really just moved on from Bates, who was literally their seventh lineman for a fifth, and Morse, who was getting older and had some issues as well with concussions. But the O-line is still returning their two tackles. It's still returning Torrance. It's still going to have McGovern in it, and Edwards, who's very used to the offense. So there's really no turnover there. So are you still feeling good about the O-line before we kind of talk about additions?
Yeah, I am, because that was one of the most stable position groups last year. But like I said at the outset of this, the only question that I have now is, why would you trade Ryan Bates? And I know that they like the depth with Alec Anderson and hopefully with Tommy Doyle coming back, Ryan Vandemark, and is there someone else that I'm missing? I know
You're missing Alec Anderson, man.
Oh, I said Alec Anderson.
Oh, you did? Richard Garage?
Maybe, yeah. So I guess that's my point right there. Ryan Bates was that perfect backup lineman, and David Edwards, maybe that was the one I was thinking of too. Edwards was a backup, but now he slots in as a starter. So, I mean, like, the starting offensive line is great, but now, luckily last year, you didn't have to test that depth. But what if you have to do that this year? Just, saving an extra $1.4, $1.5 million to get an extra draft pick for Ryan Bates, I'm not sure about that one, because now looking at it, if you knew that you were going to get rid of Mitch Morse, why would you just not keep Ryan Bates as a perfect swingman? But to the point that we've been making all night, this comes down to the money, and Ryan Bates was probably one of the most expensive backup offensive linemen, even though we loved him. So at the end of the day, it just comes down to a business. But overall, yeah, like, I still feel confident with the offensive line, and I'm sure that the Bills are still going to make more moves, because we know how Brandon Beane always loves to add depth and competition. So just because they trade away Ryan Bates doesn't mean that they're not going to find a replacement in free agency or even the draft.
And let's recap just a little bit, and then we're going to get into additions. Maybe Beane will make some more moves while we're here. Like, it's been that kind of day to kind of go over everything. So the Bills, in my projection, one more time, we'll look at the graphic one real quickly. Based on all these moves, these are our projected moves now. A lot of these actually turned into cuts in the pay cuts section. If the Bills do the extension and they do some of the restructures, and I think they will do all four of these things, so we'll have to revisit this in a week or two. And then you have $10 million of Trey White coming on June 1st. The Bills essentially have $50 million, 50. Not this moment, they don't. So I've seen some reports saying the Bills have already cleared like 80 to 90 million. Not true. But I do project them to do that and have, if you have a Josh Allen restructure, a Stephon Diggs restructure, and a Dawkins and Johnson extension, I just see all four of those happening. Maybe one of those doesn't, but I do think that four of those things happen. And then the $10 million from Trey White, that is not counting, he's counting fully on the cap until June 1st. and the Bills will save $10 million at that point. So all of those moves together give the Bills $50 million. So there's going to be a lot, and then 11 draft picks. So this isn't a situation where they went for broke. They don't have any players. They don't have any draft picks. They sold their first, second, and third for X player. They're done. It's just Josh Allen and Diggs and nobody. It is a situation to where they have 50 million, most likely. Maybe it'll end up being around 40 based on what happens. And they're going to have 11 draft picks. So it isn't a situation to where they're even close to gone for broke. It is one where they actually pulled more levers than I thought that they would. But before we get into some of the players we want to add, let's just talk briefly about some of the players that have been let go. We talked about Morse a little bit. What about Poyer and I guess Hyde? But technically, we don't know what's going to happen. He thinks he's going to retire, and as well as Trey White. So the Bills DBs and kind of that fundamental piece of the Bills defense for many, 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 many years, and some of the biggest and best and faces of Buffalo, especially their defense. So Kevin, I guess talk to me about what you feel about these Poyer and Trey White decisions.
Well, like I said at the outset of the show tonight, it's just very bittersweet. And I think hopefully in the end, it'll be more sweet than bitter because the Bills are getting younger and cheaper. They're saving more money. And you would like to think that with the new players that they're about to bring in, that those players will be more durable because a lot of those guys have been getting dinged up. We know Poyer with his injury history. He was an absolute dog, though, so he never let us know how much pain he was actually in. Mitch Morse dealt with those concussions. Trey White coming off of the Achilles, coming off of the ACL. He is obviously damaged goods. So, again, I think it'll be more sweet than bitter. But just to have all that news come out at once today, it was very, very bitter and hard to get a grasp on that, especially as we're trying to get ready for the show. It was just one after the other. And again, Trey White was a first draft pick by Sean McDermott. And then Jordan Poyer and Micah Hyde were some of the first free agency signings. And that was the core right there. Those were the pillars. Those were the building blocks for this era of Buffalo Bills football. They helped us get out of misery. They ended the drought. They helped us get to perennial Super Bowl contenders. And then obviously you have the offensive pieces with Allen and Diggs, but you couldn't do it without those guys on defense. And the fact that all three of them most likely will not be playing together anymore, it just breaks my heart, man. It's really, really hard. But on the bright side, you have someone like Rasul Douglas. You have someone like Christian Benford. Kyer Elam, I think he still has a lot of room to grow in this league, specifically on this team. And I think that the Bills are going to definitely be signing some safeties, some younger safeties in free agency. They're going to be drafting some safeties. Maybe they'll draft a corner. That's the thing, though. I don't want them to fall in the rabbit hole of saying, oh, we need a safety, so let's go draft one round one. I am still on the wide receiver train. So that's why I say you have to take it with a grain of salt because there's pros and cons to everything. And one of those cons could be now people might fall into the trap of saying, I have the Bills taking this safety round one and passing on this great wide receiver. So I think it's very careful with how we do that. Yes. And wait, officially signed? The Bills got Mitch Trubisky now too?
So Mitchell Trubisky is just reported to sign in Buff. So you would think it's free agency today. I don't know what's going on March 6th. But we have a Mitchell Trubisky signing, and we can talk about that now as well. I had it on I had Drew Lock. You'll see that coming up as a potential signing, but Mitchell Trubisky was a guy that makes sense. I think he's a quality additional upgrade to Kyle Allen, Case Keenum. I definitely think he played his way into a contract with the Steelers, a decent contract with the Steelers. Just couldn't come around. That offense was poor throughout most of his time there. It kind of came on a little bit at the end of last year before the Bills played him in the playoffs. But I really think Mitchell Trubisky is better than Mason Rudolph. He kind of caught fire in a bottle with a little bit of the way that they were able to finish the season. They kind of finished strong, but I don't think Rudolph was just in the right place at the right time. But Mitchell Trubisky did just sign, so we're interested to see in the money that comes through. I can't imagine the Bills spent more than $2 million, but we'll have to see, especially with this, what he was able to come up with. But he is a serviceable backup. He is a guy that can go in and win you a game. I'd call him a middle tier to upper tier backup quarterback. Definitely not a situation where you want to rely on him for 4 games. But I would like to still see competition in the form of a draft pick, especially if they keep all 11. I think that that's possible, but it is a pretty decent depth signing right now to go ahead and get Mitchell Trubisky before free agency starts. It is a position that you don't need to worry about. Josh Allen, Mitchell Trubisky, you have one of the best quarterback ones. I would say that Mitchell Trubisky is a fine quarterback too. Anything, I don't know what you're expecting. If you're expecting to have Baker Mayfield behind Josh Allen, it's just not going to happen. The Bills aren't going to spend their cap space that way. So he's been a fairly serviceable quarterback. Are you happy with that, Kevin?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm indifferent because Mitch really did not impress me in Pittsburgh. I was like, man, he stinks. But I like Mitch as a person, and I think that given the right system and the right coaching, that he could be a successful backup quarterback, specifically on this Bills team. So maybe Drew Lock would have been a tick better, but I mean, at that point, like you said, it's not like you're getting a Baker Mayfield. So it's like, how much better are you actually going to do for $2.5 million? So I'm fine with it.
You're not going to, it's the biggest position in sports. Like, I don't know, like, you're not going to just have like a guy that could have targeted Lock. You could have targeted like Jameis Winston. But at some point, it's good to know, like, I'm assuming if he signed today on March 6th, knowing Brandon Beane, he got a pretty good deal. There's no way he's going to spend some of his money at the moment without knowing that he thinks it's at a value before maybe he goes and plays the market and maybe he realizes that he's not going to get another quarterback anyways. So I think that it's a smart move to kind of move on from quarterback, especially with you have a few other needs that we're going to address here on the show. And then they have a few needs that they need to address very shortly. But yeah, like you're not going to get a Russell Wilson. Like sure, like ideally you want somebody that's as top end as possible, but those top end first 1Bs, 2As, they're not going to go behind Josh Allen. They're not going to do it. So there needs to be some type of connection there. Like you're not going to get a top end. I don't know, whatever you think of, like whoever you'd perceive to be like some of the best back, Jacoby Brissett. Like they're just not going to do it. They're going to want a chance to start for the most part. And Mitchell Trubisky meets talent. He meets salary. He meets demand. It all works out for Brandon Beane. And it's just something they don't have to worry about now is they have a lot of other pressing needs to kind of figure out. So it's not a bad deal. I have to wait to see the money as long as that's not out of line. And we'll probably see that shortly. I don't have any problem at all. I'm not going to sit here and argue whether we should have signed Drew Lock or not. Like ultimately he might be better because he's more unknown, I guess, but Trubisky's put together some good years. You've seen some of these guys have pretty decent seasons and they're 29, 30, 31 years old if he has to come in for Josh Allen. I'm already in the camp that the Bills are in trouble anyways if they see Drew Lock, Mitchell Trubisky. And at least Mitchell Trubisky, he knows a lot of the players. He's been here. He's been in the system. I know it's different under Brady, but he's going to at least know the place and he's going to know Josh Allen and he's going to know what he sees. I'm feeling pretty good about that signing as we get into some of the other moves that we had, but you could smash the like button right now. That'd be really, really meaningful to us. And as you look through to some of the free agents, so here's some of the other moves that we had, part two to our free agency scenario. And this was factoring about $30 million of money. The Bills, as we've said, will probably have more than this. But I have Sam Martin still getting cut. Neal did get cut. Hardy did get cut. And I had obviously Hines getting cut as well. So we nailed those. And I still think Martin does get cut.
Hey, real quick, breaking news.
Yeah.
Bills just re-signed Taylor Rapp.
Okay. So that may have been in the scenario as well. Hence the safety move. So Taylor Rapp is back in the fold as well in Buffalo. So he's immediately penciled in as a starter. They liked what they saw from Taylor Rapp, and he played super well down the stretch. We got to wait and see some of the money here because that's what's going to be important. I don't know really what happened with this scenario, but so for some reason on March 6th, the Bills decided to have a full free agency. So
they knew we were having a show. That's why.
Yeah, I mean, they wanted everybody to have a good time. That's really what the Bills are after. But these are our projections. Some of these are unrestricted free agents, and they won't be able to be signed until next Wednesday, and they can be discussed in the tampering window next Monday. So some of these players are definitely not signed at the moment. These are our projections for what we think will happen here. As I mentioned just a little bit ago, I was projecting a Drew Lock backup quarterback that can now be swapped with Mitchell Trubisky And I would assume about that money. I would hope so. David Edwards did re-sign. I got close. I said $2 million. It was about 2.3. So we were very close there. And the rest of these guys, except the Bills players in Jones and Epinesa, they are remaining to be seen. Those are the only two that you can do something with at the moment. The rest of those guys are unrestricted free agents. But the Bills could play salary cap bingo, as well as compensation bingo. So I wanted to ask you about that, Kevin. Are you somebody that wants to lose some of their existing free agents in order to receive draft picks next season? Or does that not play a factor in you like you did with Tremaine Edmonds? Or does that not play a role for your decision-making process as we pick free agents?
I mean, I guess it does, but it doesn't. Was there one specifically in mind that you were thinking of? Like Gabe Davis?
Epinesa would be one that I'm thinking. Leonard Floyd. Those are guys that could earn you. Those could earn you rookie picks.
I try to live more in the present than the future. I mean, you always have to think about the future when you're trying to win now and in the future. But I don't look at these players and these signings and say, well, if we do or don't sign him this year, we're going to get this comp pick. So let's try to play that bingo game. I look at it more as I think AJ Epinesa is a very solid defensive end who is still peaking on this defense. So I want him back. That's how I see it. And then I guess if that doesn't work, okay, you get a comp pick. But the first goal is, can he play on this team? Can he be a fit on this defense? And can we make it work financially? And if everything gets checked off, then you bring back AJ Epinesa. And then if you can't, then you say, okay, well, at least maybe we can get a comp pick out of this. I think that's kind of how I was with Tremaine Edmonds too. I mean, I know he was more polarizing, and I know that he cost way more than Epinesa is going to. But I didn't really go into that saying I would rather have a third-round pick than Tremaine Edmonds. I said, let's see how we can try to work for the 2023 Buffalo Bills before thinking about the 2024 Buffalo Bills.
Yeah, absolutely. And live as we $14.5 million over 3 years for Taylor Rapp. It's a big deal. That's not little. That's not a little amount of money. That's a lot of money. However, let's wait to see. That's a starter money. You're right. Let's wait to see what that looks like, though. That's a lot of agent fluff. So about $5 million of that's going to be agent fluff. So we'll see if that's how that turns out. I don't think he's going to get $15.5 million. I don't think that's going to 15 is going to be the number. I think there's going to be a lot of not likely to be earned incentives, a lot of not guaranteed money. But for the Bills to make that re-signing now at that amount doesn't really say that it's going to be $5 million against the cap. No chance at that. It's going to be 2 to 3 against the cap. That year 3 is not going to be likely to be seen. It's going to be unguaranteed money. There's no way that Taylor Rapp's going to see the 3 years unless it's something really team friendly, which is why I think the Bills signed Trubisky at the moment and why they would have re-signed Taylor Rapp. They said, hey, Taylor, you're going to have a good opportunity to start here now. And he's that starter money. So Taylor Rapp is starting in Buffalo. There's no way he's a third safety anymore. He showed enough at the end of the year that he's able to take over. And look, he sealed the AFC. Taylor Rapp sealed the AFC East with a really good read. Yes, Tua was looking at his third and fourth option for some reason at the end of the game, which was bizarre. However, Taylor Rapp had a nice read and broke the route for the receiver, ultimately intercepting the ball and the Bills winning. He did enough, and the Bills missed him in the playoffs, Kevin. They really did at times. He was a guy that could have absolutely been utilized against Patrick Mahomes. They just did not have the linebackers or safety. So Rapp, I think the Bills looked at it and were like, we really needed Rapp. Like, we played that poorly defensively at times that we could have really used Rapp in the AFC Championship game. But yeah, that's crazy. We're getting signings, so stick around, man. And everybody, please follow Built in Buffalo Twitter account. Go check that out. We'll have live updates there all night. You can catch all the graphics, all the stuff that's coming through on the network, as well as Facebook. Please check that out. Please smash the like button here on YouTube and follow us. Follow the channel. Like, we're going to have great content all season long. So hit and follow that button because it doesn't need to end here. Next week's show is going to be just as good. And it's going to be the start of free agency too. So we're going to have a ton of opportunity to discuss free agents live there as well. But a couple of moves have happened as we've been on air. We've had a Mitchell Trubisky signing, and we've had also Taylor Rapp re-signing. So are you feeling like you can feel confident going from Poyer to Rapp? Where's your head out, Kat? Are you feeling good? Are you feeling good about the way he finished the season?
Before I talk about Taylor Rapp, I just want to add on to your point. So, like Kevin said, make sure you smash the like, subscribe to Built and Bow, and make sure to follow us on all of our channels. And also, tonight's show is brought to you by Dave Dengler and the Larson-Timko Funeral Home in Fredonia, New York. Larson-Timko Funeral Home is committed to providing their community with the best possible service in their time of need, offering 100% fully guaranteed price and pre-arranged funeral plans with live streaming available. Visit their website at larsontimkofuneralhome.com or give them a call at 716-679-9000. So to answer your question, I think this is interesting because I think this is a case in point with what we've been talking about all night, where you look at it and you say, okay, I think I like this, but I also don't like it. And I think I just need to wait and see what else is coming. Safety position, case in point right here. It really stings to lose Jordan Poyer. But then you say, okay, you get Taylor Rapp, who played solid at the end of the year. He's younger. Hopefully he's a little bit more durable. I know he suffered some injuries at the end of last season, but he's cheaper, 3 years, $14.5 million. And then you're thinking, okay, on one side I like it, but on the other side, would have been better to just keep Jordan Poyer and then draft another one and pair him with that rookie or free agency. So that's why it's so interesting. And I love that we can talk about it here and just kind of all come to a conclusion together. And really, I don't even know if we're going to get to conclusions because I don't really have any answers for it, to be honest. Like, this is more me and you, for that matter, and our fans here just kind of talking it out, because I feel like we're going to have to help each other because there's just been so much going on. I don't know the answer. Like, is Taylor Rapp the answer? Is he the Bills starting safety in 2024, 2025, and 2026? I don't know. It's just very, very fascinating.
Yeah, it's extremely fascinating. But the Bills gave him 3 years. They feel like that he is the answer to take over for Jordan Poyer, and I think he showed enough. So he's going to be. He knew the defense. They felt really good about it, and I think they're going to play a little bit more man coverage too. So I think it comes with a little bit of a philosophy change underneath Bobby Babich Jr. To see what happens with the way that they're clearly changing their style a little bit, getting rid of a zone style corner in Trey White, moving to Taylor Rapp, a more aggressive in the box safety, ability to play dime backer, ability to cover deep, has a lot of run stopping ability. So there's going to be good intentions with Taylor Rapp, but that is starter money. So he is going to secure one of the safety spots as we start the season. So what players would you like the Bills to be resigned that were here last year? I think the big one for me, they signed Edwards, was actually a low-key one that I really did want back. But other than that, I want AJ Epinesa back. I think that he is a solid rotational defensive end. I don't think he's going to cost a ton of money. There are good enough defensive ends. You have like Yannick Ngakoue. You have a bunch of guys, Yetur Gross-Matos, in free agency that are on his tier. And I do believe that they're not going to all get paid. So, Kevin, who's one player that you want back for the Bills this season?
I think I'd have to go with AJ Epinesa too. I would like to see Leonard Floyd back, but he did kind of tally off towards the end of the year. And considering that he's going to want to get paid, I know the Bills are clearing up a lot of cap space, but is that really smart financially? Do you want to bring back Leonard Floyd for, let's just say, another 1 year, $10 million deal? You might want to get cheaper and younger with that too, because Floyd is in his 30s. It is interesting because he played with Von Miller in LA, same with Taylor Rapp, and a couple of the guys that we kind of pinned here on our wish list that I was talking about, they also played on that Ram defense. So maybe for those purposes, you want that continuity, but I don't know. I think I'm more of a no than a yes towards Leonard Floyd. Something that I was thinking about, though, this is interesting. Does this change our opinions on Gabe Davis? Because with the Bills clearing out more money, could this be a sign that they could potentially bring Gabe back, or are we done with Gabe? Do we think that I saw someone said in the comments here where they said we had to rip the Band-Aid off and start fresh. We got to get younger. Well, since the Band-Aid's already been ripped, are we done with Gabe, or do we have some more money to try to coerce him to come back?
Gabe Davis is an interesting player, and I want everybody's opinion. And he's a polarizing guy. You saw players, Gabe Davis sticking up for his teammates, with some Bills fans heckling him at the end of the season last year. And many people are going to be done with him. But at what cost? I think that's the answer. If there's a scenario to where he is young enough, that Gabe Davis isn't 31, he's a player that does a lot well for this roster. If there's a number that makes sense, I think it makes sense. However, the double-digit number, Not going to happen. I don't see him returning. But Beane loves his draft picks. He loves his young players. This is really the first instance we've ever had of him letting go his guys. And it's because they had to. And maybe they had to for guys like Rapp, apparently, for who's also a little bit younger, coming off of his first contract. And then obviously signed a 1-year deal. So he's really in the second contract range. Gabe Davis is in the second contract territory. So at some point, like, there's a reason they're making moves. And could Gabe Davis be in the fold? I wouldn't be shocked by it, but I think it's a situation to where they're going to want him. He's 24. Like, a lot of people think Gabe Davis may be 27, 28, 29. He's 24. So there's a situation to where the Bills feel like he could get better. And if Josh Allen signs off on it, I don't think he has player personnel decisions like Aaron Rodgers. But if he signs off on it, the Bills will listen. The Bills will say, all right, like, we'll see what he wants. But I think that still comes with the draft pick, guys. Like, there's under no influence if they sign Gabe, if they signed really anybody outside of like a top tier guy. I don't believe. And then some of those top tier guys were franchised. We saw T. Higgins get franchised, Michael Pittman. We saw Mike Evans resign. So those are the kind of guys I was talking about. But outside of that situation, we're going to pull up a free agency list now in a moment. But beside that, I think there is a scenario to where the Bills could bring back Gabe. It's certainly not at 10 or 11 or 12, but it's definitely at a number like 6 or 7, because I would rather have Gabe Davis than Noah Brown or a couple others. So that's just my personal opinion. But we just had a Rasul Douglas tweet of sheesh. So what do you think he's sheeshing, Kevin?
Maybe that Taylor Rapp is back. I don't know. I mean, I could think of a lot of explanations for the word sheesh today, because I probably said that a lot myself. So what does Rasul Douglas think? Is that a sheesh that I got restructured and not extended? Is that a sheesh that Jordan Poyer's gone? Is that a sheesh that Taylor Rapp is going to be one of the starting safeties playing behind him? Again, I try to not read into this too much because, I mean, look at Stephon Diggs. Don't look at his Twitter.
Yeah, you can't really read too much into it. But as you players are commenting on live transactions, that's interesting. Normal day-to-day stuff, don't look into it ever. But some transaction comments are kind of interesting. But yeah, maybe it could be, his whole DB. It's the DBs. Don't forget he's a DB. He was really the only one kept outside of, like a Benford on a rookie deal. Literally all gone. Taron Johnson, obviously. But, most of his running mates there were released, but maybe that's for a Savage. And, we'll get into some of those free agents in a moment. But like you said earlier, Poyer's gone. Hyde's probably gone. You have a situation to where, Trey White's gone. So, I guess you could sheesh that, or maybe they're working on an extension for him. Who knows? Because they do project it.
I want to say one thing before we get into some of the guys that we could be signing here, because as we're talking about the safeties, this just made me think of it. Now, a couple of weeks ago, when we did not have a show, I recorded this and I posted it on the Built in Buffalo YouTube channel if you guys want to check that out. And I talked about the Bills window. And the way I phrased it was that the Bills have essentially 2 windows, one for the front half of Josh Allen's career and one for the back half. And I said that 2024 was the last year for window number 1. And then you're going to have to rebuild for the back half of his career starting in 2025. Well, today, this is essentially the start of window number 2.
Yep.
This is the end of an era right now. And that's why I think I'm so blindsided right now, because I didn't forecast. I didn't project this happening. I thought we were going to get another year of Mitch Morse. I thought we are going to get another year of Jordan Poyer. I thought Trey White would be back for at least another year. And then I thought, okay, maybe after 2024, they say, all right, based on the contracts and the ages of these players, now is when we have to get younger and kind of retool for the second half of Josh Allen's career. Well, Brandon Beane ripped the Band-Aid off today and said, well, that's the end of era number 1. Era number 2 starts right now. So what do you think about that, Kevin? Because like I said, I made that clip by myself, so I know we didn't talk about it that much, but did you agree with my assessment of that? And now looking at it, I guess I was correct. It's just my timeline didn't match up with Beane's.
Yeah. I mean, I think that whether you wanted one more year of window 1 or you wanted to start window 2, that's really the question. It isn't the window shutting. It's just you're opening another window. So window 1 ended today. Is window I think a lot of people are done with window 1. And I think that most people were nervous, but they were nervous because they thought window 1 would close and that was the only window to be opened. there's window 2 that's opened, and window 2 just comes at the cost of a couple of window 1 players. But it comes with bringing over a bunch of window 1 players, obviously. It comes with 11 draft picks. The Bills aren't the Rams. They aren't some of the situations where these teams don't have picks. They have 11 picks, a lot of draft capital to work with, a lot of young, cheap talent, 8 starters on rookie contracts. And that's definitely a point that I wanted to make here tonight. I had jotted down 8 rookie contracts that they're going to be able to have here that are contributors that are still on rookie deals. Let me clarify. So like Khalil Shakir, for instance, you have Spencer Brown still playing on a rookie deal. You have Dalton Kincaid. You have James Cook. You have Gregory Rousseau. You have Terrell Bernard, Christian Benford. And then, if any of those, if they play Kyer Elam now, he could be another. So there's definitely some talented player. And then you have all your backup O-line, Vandemark, Alec Anderson, Tommy Doyle, all those guys, Richard Garage, if he continues to thrive, all those guys are on young, cheap rookie deals. So they have a ton of young talent. They have 11 more draft picks coming in, as well as now projected to see if they make those 4 moves we talked about earlier in the show, plus the $10 million from Trey White. I'm projecting around $50 million that the Bills will have in just weeks time, or however long they want to make those moves. The 10 million coming in June though. So 10 of that will come in June. If they want to make one final move on June 1st, they can do so, or basically pay their rookies, which aren't going to be that expensive. That's the whole benefit. And then be able to move around some things at that point. So that's what's really fascinating to me, is that the window 2 starts with some top end talent, some playoff talent, some Super Bowl talent, 11 rookies, 8 rookies that are playing on rookie deals, 8 players on rookie deals playing. So that's about 19 players on rookie deals that you're going to have on your roster if you keep all those picks, plus all your premier players. So that's a nice way to start window 2, to opening of window 2 with that style of players. And it's a good question. How many of those players of 11? I thought a lot less a week ago, but I certainly think 9 or 10 of them, they may jockey and move up once. But I do believe 9 or 10 of those choices are selected. The 3, 6, and the 7th, I don't care as much about. So, but I do really care about what Beane's able to do with 4th and 5th round picks, the Matt Milanos, the Taron Johnsons, the Gabe Davises. So those style, Khalil Shakirs, those style of players, to me, are needed. So I think that you can still utilize those talented players, as well as Justin Shorter, another player that has every right to earn the 5th or 6th receiver job. Definitely going to take over on special teams now with not Saran Neal, no Tyler Matakevich. He's going to be a guy that's going to be leaned on. He was said to be drafted because of his talent, his deep talent, his ability to get open, and his ability to play special teams. And you're going to see that this season. So he's another player that everybody can have. And elevation to Kyer Elam. It's not over for him. We counted AJ Epinesa out, and he turned into a player that we're talking about here tonight wanting to re-sign. So Kyer Elam is a guy that has everything out in front of him. Doesn't have Dane Jackson to worry about and doesn't have Trey White to worry about anymore. He's talking about a situation with just Benford and Rasul Douglas, and Douglas is on a 1-year deal. So Kyer Elam has every right to be corner 4 right now. And that's a room. We talked about it in the Trey White perspective, but Kevin, are you comfortable with a Rasul Douglas, a Christian Benford, a Taron Johnson, and a Kyer Elam? Those are your 4 corners. Are you nervous about that, or is that still as good as it was to end the year?
I mean, I think it would be better if you had Trey White in the fold, assuming that he was healthy. So maybe you want to pick up another corner now, because I think they will try to add at that position, whether it's at the bottom barrel of free agency or in the draft. But overall, yeah, I still feel pretty comfortable because Douglas and Benford are very, very good corners. Elam, I'm still very high on him, especially to your point. How about maybe the Bills are trying to play a little bit more man coverage? Maybe that suits Elam a little bit better. And we'll see about Dane Jackson. I always forget. Is he a restricted free agent?
Who? Dane Jackson? No.
Yeah, or is he unrestricted?
He's unrestricted.
So, I mean, maybe we know how Sean McDermott likes Dane Jackson. Maybe he'll come back. But overall, I do feel pretty comfortable about the cornerbacks. Now, safety is another one that's I'm not too comfortable right now, but it's early. I mean, look at all the moves that Brandon Beane made today, and it's only March 6th. So give it a few weeks, and I think I'm going to be feeling very confident about the defensive back room as a whole.
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole point here is that we're live on our show. We're making moves on March 6th. Nothing's even happening. Like, this isn't a day. It's not like March 6th means anything. Brandon Beane decided to make franchise moves, and he decided to sign some backup player style players and start a starter and Taylor Rapp of a re-signing and not let him hit the free agency market. So for whatever reason, Brandon Beane felt like he couldn't let Rapp hit the market. So that tells you something. Beane's not usually wrong about those things. Like, maybe the player becomes good or isn't, or is in the middle. Maybe he's not fully going to be the best safety in the world, but he's usually right with his predictions. He let like Poyer go last year and came back at a reasonable rate. He's usually right with like letting Tremaine Edmonds walk. Yes, Von Miller got paid a lot of money, but the Bills were going for it. And Von Miller just gave $8 to $9 million of it. So, at some point, like, where do we draw the line with how good he is in free agency? Because the free agency signings are one of his better traits. And actually we're carrying him for a while while some of the draft picks were playing up to speed. So that's what's going to be interesting is what happens there. So as we continue on looking through free agency, though, like, we have to bring one of my favorite looks, grids, is the Mike Clay unrestricted free agency sheet, because it does a really great job of showing you all the players that are available at the moment. This was at the beginning of the day, so it's not going to have any of the Bills cuts on it, obviously, but you see some really talented names here, and ones that I want to see the Bills start to really dive into. So there's some top end safeties, Xavier McKinney, you have Diggs, Quandre Diggs, you have Kevin Byard, Cameron Krill, Savage. You have a ton of safety, just like half the safeties in the league. And then you see Rapp is on this list here toward a little. He is above Jeremy Chin, everybody's favorite Jeremy Chin. Mike Clay did rank Taylor Rapp above him there. So I do believe they're similar style of players. Chin's a little bit different, but that's a really good position I'm looking at. Defensive interior tackle, you have Chris Jones, Leonard Williams, Christian Wilkins. Will they go top end at one of these positions? The Bills will now have the money to. Would you rather look at a Marquise Brown or Kelvin Ridley? Gabe Davis is third on the free agency list, guys, and this is unbiased. This isn't someone that likes the Bills. What does everyone think about that, Kevin? What do you number 3? So, like, us saying we don't want the third best free agent receiver is a little bit weird. I know we want different, but that's still a little weird, especially if he came back at the right value. But then you have people like pressing, like, I really want Donovan Peoples-Jones or KJ Osborne or Noah Brown or Kendrick Bourne, who's on an ACL. Like, that's still weird to me, that you would prefer one of those guys over maybe Gabe Davis. Like, really, there's only 4 players that I may take over him, especially at a similar price point, like Ridley, Marquise Brown, Tyler Boyd, maybe Curtis Samuel, Odell Beckham Jr., but it's not a huge list. There's some people that would probably take Gabe over OBJ. So that's what's kind of interesting to me. So I want to ask you, if you look at this list the best that you can, and you had to sign one top tier position, where's it going to be?
Well, I just want to say real quick, when you were asking about any Bills free agents that I want them to re-sign, and I said Epinesa, I still agree with that, but I totally missed Daquan Jones. That one has to get done. I mean, that kind of goes without saying, but I just want to clarify. I do want Epinesa back, but I definitely want Daquan back. And when you were going over those defensive tackles, I started thinking about that. I was like, wouldn't that be funny if if Brandon Beane somehow gets Christian Wilkins to come here after it looks like his days in Miami might be done, and we know his relationship with Josh Allen. And I was like, man, wouldn't that come full circle if you somehow get Christian Wilkins to come here? But then I was thinking, no, because I want Daquan Jones here no matter what. So I don't think you're going to spend money on Daquan and another top defensive tackle. So my answer to combine both of those questions, I want Daquan Jones here as the one tech to pair with Ed Oliver for at least 2 more years. And then outside of that, I mean, I don't really have like a key free agent target, because I think that my main target is a wide receiver too, but I think that needs to be found in the draft. Now, I think there are still a lot of solid wide receivers here, and maybe now after today's moves, safety and free agency becomes a little bit more of a pressing need for me. So I would say either finding a wide receiver or a safety is at the top of my wish list here in terms of free agency.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting is, do you think that after making these moves today, Kevin, Think about it for a second. That's why I picked AJ. I knew about Daquan Jones. Why I picked AJ Epinesa is because I think he fits the age and the mold of the new window. Knowing what you know about window 2, do you still go Daquan? I know how good he is, but do you still go Daquan Jones, knowing they just cut Trey White, they just cut Mitch Morse, they just cut Jordan Poyer, they're not going to re-sign Micah Hyde? Like, at some point, that's a different mission. So do you think that they don't care about that when it comes to him? Because I think that ship may have sailed, especially at a certain price point.
Yeah, I mean, that is a good point, because maybe that's part of the reason why I left him off my list in the first place, because AJ Epinesa is within that age range and Daquan isn't. So, I mean, to your point, you're right. I mean, maybe Brandon Beane is setting us up to not re-sign Daquan Jones. And in that case, as much as I said this as a joke, because as people are saying in the comments here, like, Christian Wilkins obviously loves Josh Allen and can't keep his hands off of him. I mean, is that more realistic now, that maybe you pool more of that money towards getting a Christian Wilkins who's younger and probably maybe a little bit better just based on his age than Daquan Jones?
Yes, it's fully realistic. And I guess that's the point of we were, trying to make about window 2, is that you enter. Let's recap window 2 real quickly. Window 1 has now been shut. The difference is window 2 is opening, and you're entering window 2 with 8 players on rookie deals that are playing, that are meaningful contributors. You got a next step from Khalil Shakir. You have the next step from Dalton Kincaid. You have the next step from Christian Benford. You have the next step from James Cook. So you're starting window 2 with those players on top of 11 draft choices that aren't going to cost you anything against the cap, roughly $3 million total for the whole slew of draft class. And then you're looking at a situation, you're bringing in obviously the top end quarterback and the top end Diggs and other players that you're still bringing over. The maybe one of the best linebacking core we got robbed of seeing this year in Terrell Bernard and Matt Milano. I mean, that is such a quality linebacking core. That and you have Ed Oliver developing. So there is a talent at cornerback still. The O-line played as well as possible. I mean, it really was one of the best O-lines in the league and the best O-lines that Josh Allen has had. Yes, they made a little bit of a switch, but these are guys, 4 starters that are returning, and a guy that was their main backup last year returning as well on basically a starter salary. And then bringing back Taylor Rapp, who's been in the system and now really only needing to fill one safety. I had Taylor Rapp on a bunch of people's lists that I saw of players they wanted to re-sign. So he did enough at the end of the year. Yes, he struggled at times, but he showed me a lot come the end of the year. I didn't really think that the player fit, but it took him a little while to learn, and the Bills definitely agreed. But all that being said, I think it's very, very possible the Bills go after one splash signing now. They didn't make those moves to just make those moves and have fun and get to the cap floor. They could have done that. We talked about how they could do that. Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs restructures, maybe asking Vaughn to take, cutting Hardy, cutting Hines, cutting, Saran Neal. So some of those moves that did happen were the way to get back to the floor. But they're going to do more than the floor. They're going to restructure Josh. We'll see what they do with Diggs. They're going to give some extensions out, most likely. I don't think they're going to want all those players on walk years. They're going to have money. And not a million holes, enough holes. Would you rather, there's running backs there. There's every running back in the league. So does Brandon Beane finally. Real quickly, I wanted to bring this up one more for running back. Barkley, Jacobs, Henry, Eckler, DeAndre Swift, Pollard, Alexander Madison, J.K. Dobbins coming off an injury, but has been nice in his career. Gibson. There are some names here that is as good as it's ever been, and they're not going to be in millions. They're not going to be double digits. So does he finally get a running back? Does he finally get a safety, top end safety, or McDermott likes to develop safety? So maybe that's a draft pick too. So all that kind of wrapped into one bow is the position defensive tackle. And instead of Daquan Jones, do they make a phone call to one of those top guys at the top of the board? Would you be shocked?
No, I guess, I'm glad we're having this conversation, because that's why I think it's important that we talk through this, because leave that up for a second, because I want to take a look at some of these edge rushers and defensive tackles, because I could totally see the Bills spending some money on defensive line and free agency, so they feel like they don't have to allocate those resources to that position early on in the draft, and they can stay true to their board and try to get that wide receiver. So now that they open up this much money, it could be realistic that they could maybe go get, let's say, a Jadeveon Clowney, or to our point earlier, Christian Wilkins, or one of those guys. I'm looking at the list here. So, I mean, Danielle Hunter, That's probably too much money right there. Chase Young, I don't think that he fits their mold. Like Shaq Barrett, that could be interesting. Jonathan Greenard, maybe. Like, one of those guys like that where you're thinking, all right, this guy is totally out of the Bills' price range. But what if they have a Von Miller scenario where it's like, holy cow, how are we able to finesse him based on the cap hits and the salary cap to get him to come here? So as much as we started with this conversation, I was like, you know what? I think they're just going to kind of fill out their depth and rotational pieces here. They really might go after one of these top guys now. Leonard Williams, Chris Jones. I mean, I think that's still a little bit too rich for their blood. But still, I guess what I'm trying to say is I won't be shocked if we see a splash signing now.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting too is like, okay, let's recap last year too, where I was on our show Going Deep Buffalo, and everybody was talking about right tackle, like in Spencer Brown became who he is and really an entrenched top 20 tackle in the league. He's really good. Linebacker, we talked about linebacker ad nauseum. We talked about Terrell Bernard. Oh my God, he wasn't even in the mentions. Everybody was talking about this and that, needing to draft Simpson or Jack Campbell. Not even in the. Have we talked about linebacker or right tackle once? Those are the two positions come August that we would have been begging to take, begging right now to look at this list and say, you still have Bobby Wagner back on, but you have Jordan Hicks or Patrick Queen or Frankie Louvu. These would have been guys we would have been begging for right now. Linebacker's no longer in the discussion because it doesn't need to be. You have an all-pro next to a guy that was basically like all-world in Terrell Bernard at times last year, and really think the Bills beat the Chiefs with their starting linebackers. It's one of the biggest positions that Andy Reid targets. I think that's a completely different game with even one of them. So the Bills are returning their linebackers. But what's interesting too is we could be talking about tackle right now. Why wouldn't we be talking about a Trent Brown or a Fleming or a Charles Leno? Like there's guys out there that we could have been talking about right now. But once again, we're not needing to talk about right tackle and right tackle and linebacker. So I think that you pivot to interior D-line. And possibly instead of using the money that now we know what Brandon Beane's saying, we do have a tell. The tell is that he cut his older players. He didn't have to do that. He could have made other moves. The tell is that he wanted to free up enough money to sign somebody, in my opinion. What position will it be at? That current receiver doesn't really get to me that much unless you're really targeting Calvin Ridley or Marquise Brown or something. It doesn't really, because the next best guy you could argue is Gabe Davis. So I don't know how much that really gets me. I think you're probably going to look at a guy like Noah Brown or DJ Chark or Odell Beckham Jr., maybe Curtis Samuel, Tyler Boyd. But I think really the position is interior D-line, and the Bills saw the free agency class on Monday, and they want to make Brandon Beane's not going to sit there. He wants to make some phone calls, and he needed to be in a position to not just kick tires with agents and say, look, I cut some players so that I could have a chance to get Leonard Williams or Christian Wilkins, maybe even a DJ Reader at one tech. I've seen some people compare, Sweat to him in the draft class. And I'm like, well, you could just get DJ Reader too. Like at the same time, like you could just get who he could be and plug him right in there. So there's some definite names in here that the Bills could go after, especially with Josh Allen already throwing to Diggs and Shakir. They're going to get a draft receiver. I think they're going to get two. So how pressing is a receiver in free agency, especially with the names we're now looking at? I don't know, man. It's not overly pressing. Like I don't need to have DJ Chark on my roster. Like it'd be interesting, it'd be fun, but it's not going to overly move the needle for me come draft day. So that's why I think the players that do are those D linemen that you mentioned. Who could he be targeting? I don't know, but we do know he was looking at defensive tackle in the NFL draft the year Christian Wilkins was drafted, and obviously went at Oliver. So could that be a natural pairing? I mean, you could argue that with that kind of pairing and that linebacking core and those corners, Kevin, you can argue that may be a new way to try to get Mahomes out of rhythm. So I wouldn't be shocked by a defensive lineman signing, and maybe it comes at the interior this time, rather than paying for a edge rusher like Zadarius Smith or Danielle Hunter. But maybe they just say, we're going to get after it at the defensive end spot. We're going to continue to spend money there until we get it right. And the Bills almost got it right last year.
Yeah, the more we talk about this, the more that I'm warming up to the idea of sinking some money into the defensive line. Because again, I don't want to fall into the trap of drafting one early, and I still want to be on the wide receiver train. So I'm thinking that we really could see a splash signing on the defensive line in the coming days here. But something that I was also thinking about, now you mentioned this too, could these moves, because to your point earlier, the Bills are still somewhere between, we'll just say, 10 million over and 10 million under. We don't have the official numbers, so they're somewhere around the cap floor right now when it's all said and done. Now, they do have a lot of moves that can get them up to that $50 million mark that you set. But I don't want to make it seem like the Bills have some of the most money in the NFL now. So let's look at the other angle too, where they say, you know what? We're still going to do what we planned on doing before all these moves were made. And now with that extra few $1,000,000, do you go get a Marquise Brown? Because we were talking a couple of weeks ago, do you get a Marquise Brown or a Noah Brown? I keep getting confused because they have the same they have the same last names, but the two Browns, Marquise or Noah. And I said maybe Noah just based on the cap situation. But now with this extra money, you could say, let's go get Hollywood Brown. So then do you sink more money into the wide receiver position, knowing that you're still probably going to draft one? Or do you say, well, we're going to draft one, so that means that we should go sign a defensive tackle or a defensive end? So it's just very fascinating to see how they're going to put this together, because you could also look at it and say, well, now we want to draft a defensive tackle, so let's go sign a Calvin Ridley.
Yeah, I mean, that's what makes us fascinating with the new way. So the new window. So here's our window wish list. This is when basically we're thinking that they were going to end window one, like going for one more year with kind of some more basic needed free agencies. And good question by Sean Thompson. Do we trade for an established receiver? I don't. That's maybe Beane knows something we don't. Maybe he's had to clear some stuff up, because how elite are we talking here? Are you talking like a Jerry Jeudy, Cortland Sutton? Or are you talking like even higher? That I don't know if they go higher than that, but those Denver receivers seem to have always been of interest to the Bills. So maybe they go with the that style of receiver. I don't know really where, one of the bigger ones would have been Mike Evans, but he just re-signed. I don't know who the receiver would be that would be for trade that would be entertained above the Cortland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy range. But I think it's possible, knowing that Beane's willing to trade and definitely trying to get somebody on a decent value. But you could look around the league and maybe find an interesting name somewhere of a player. Like, everybody knows Justin Jefferson's available. If that's what elite receiver means, I don't. But I do think that it's possible you give a 4th or 5th round pick now for Jerry Jeudy. That is a way that they could have freed up money to do something like that. I think that Jerry Jeudy, is a very intriguing player and probably would be above Gabe, probably the 3rd best receiver on the free agency market. So if you can get him for a 4th, I think that is more what I'd be an established receiver, maybe an established elite receiver. I don't believe that that's the way that they're going to go with an established elite receiver. But yeah, I think it's more like Jerry Jeudy would be more along the lines of what the Bills would be thinking. And I would be hard pressed to think that the Bills haven't had a call on Jerry Jeudy at some point in Brandon Beane's tenure over the last year. I would be shocked if they didn't at least check in on his pricing. But if you look at our graphic here, I want to go over our kind of projected free agency. Now, this was projected at the values before some of the veteran cuts that the Bills just made today. Obviously it's not going to be Locke. It's clearly going to be Mitchell Trubisky. David Edwards was re-signed, but we were thinking Foreman or Zeke kind of bounced around there in the middle tier to back up James Cook. They will officially probably be signing a running back. It just depends on what tier. Are we talking about just bringing back, a guy that they had last year, possibly? Are we talking about a middle tier guy like Foreman or like Ezekiel Elliott? Or are we talking about one of those top end, at least somewhere on the topper end, Josh Jacobs, Saquon Barkley, maybe a little bit below that, like an Austin Eckler? So at what range, Derrick Henry, at what range will the Bills bring in a running back? Because they will. There's one on the roster. So they'll probably bring in a rookie, and we'll see how big of a running back, or is it just Ty Johnson? So we'll see how big of a running back they go there.
Well, I was going to say real quick,
yeah,
I think that this opens a door for them to sign a running back and bring back Ty Johnson, as Scott just said right here, because Nyheim Hines was running back 3. And I posed this question about a month ago, and I said, where does Ty Johnson fit? Because I think that he becomes expendable with Nyheim Hines. And Beane said that he planned on having Hines on the roster. And, well, so much for that. So I think Ty Johnson can come back as a cheap running back 3. And now you can go sign that big bruiser RB2. So go get an upgraded version of Latavius Murray and Damian Harris. So does that mean that it can be Deontay Foreman? I love Foreman. I think you can get him for $2 or $3 million as we projected. I think Zeke would be an interesting option. And of course, everyone's going to talk about Derrick Henry. I think he's still a little bit too rich for the Bills' blood because I would rather have them go spend that money on a wide receiver or a defensive lineman or a safety. And we're going to have to talk about safety here coming up too, based on all of our projections here with the money. But I still don't want to sink too much money into the running back position. So I think between Deontay Foreman and Ty Johnson, you give them $5 million total. You pair them with James Cook, boom, you're done for the year.
Sam Martin is still not officially cut. He is a projected cut off of my free agency scenarios. Now, knowing, like, if you know Sam Martin's contract, which I've looked into, his salary guarantees on March 18th. So in 12 days, Sam Martin is fully guaranteed. So if he is on the roster, he's your punter. Like, they're not going to pay him a fully guaranteed contract and go somewhere else. I don't think he sees that date. I think they brought in Hack to see what he can do and at least show that he's a veteran presence. And I think one of those 6-round picks that the Bills have 3 of, I think may go to punter to get a young, cheap punter on a rookie deal, like they were trying to do with Matt Araiza, who's now a Kansas City Chief. So I do believe that they were looking at that scenario again with the 11 draft picks. So everyone's like, well, they might not going to use all 11 draft picks. And normally I actually am the leader of that charge. I just think that now you can get the special teamers instead of signing these guys that are old for $2 million. You can use some of those picks on the special teamers, the punter. And that's, to me, maybe you even in the 7th, 6th, 7th round go kicker, put him on the practice squad, and have a rookie kicker, young rookie kicker that is there and available if needed as well. So I do believe at the punter position, though, Sam Martin's going to get cut in the next 12 days. If they fully guarantee that, I'd be shocked. But it's possible that the Bills are like, we don't want to lose his holding ability. You know, he looked pretty good at the end of the year, minus the playoffs. I would cut him. I think his performance, he did get hurt though, so that's kind of unfair, but his performance at the end of the year was poor. But he came off of that stretch in the regular season where he was like really good. He was really bad for most of the year and then like excellent for a few weeks, like excellent, getting the Bills into position to win games. And then the playoff disaster from Sam Martin. I would have cut him alone because that's the most important time of the year. But that did come with a blocked field goal situation to where he was trying to run down a player. So I don't know how much you blame him for that, but that special teams disaster, the Bills were pretty accountable to age and everything else this season. The special teams did get off the hook with just like a Saran Neal let go. So I don't know. The special teams coordinator stayed, Matt Smiley. Bass missed a huge field goal. I don't think special teams are great in the playoffs in general. I would have moved on from some of these players, but I think Martin is gone. But we'll see if if his salary fully guarantees he's here to stay. But he is on my cut list as of now. So $50 million. And Kevin, they've already allocated some of it to Rap. Are you, Alex? So let's put it all aside now. Receiver, we talked about receiver, talked about defensive interior, safety for a minute. Are you putting it into some of these? There is like half the safeties in the league on the free agency list. And a couple of good ones that the Bills saw up close and personal in Indianapolis last week. A couple of guys that I was tweeting about all week as well. So there's a couple of rookie safeties that could be had here shortly. But are you going to like consider the safety room? Like, would you spend money with Rap and another guy? Or are you talking about like a middle tier budget guy to add?
Yeah, I mean, this is also fascinating. And I think it's important that we have this conversation because we talked about pairing Jordan Poyer with either someone like Jeremy Chin or Darnell Savage Jr. the last time we had a show together. And then we said, or you could either pair Poyer with a rookie. And now essentially Jordan Poyer just became Taylor Rapp tonight in the last hour. So with the Bills re-signing Taylor Rapp, there's your starting safety number 1 for now. He knows the system and he's going to have to try to teach the new guy and put him on his shoulders. Now, let's see, just off the top of my head, I don't think I'm that comfortable trusting Taylor Rapp and a rookie because Taylor Rapp didn't do that much to impress me. I think he finished strong, but really, I would rather have Jordan Poyer than Taylor Rapp as one of the starting safeties. So based on that, and based on the fact that the Bills cleared up more money, I think I want to sign another free agent, because then you can still draft one. Obviously, if you have a lot of picks, you can still draft one and then just let them battle it out in camp. So I think I still want to see the Bills sign a Jeremy Chin or a Darnell Savage, try to get younger, try to get better, and that way you don't have to rely on as much inexperience.
Yeah, and I mean, if you pull up the list real quick one more time, you're talking about the middle tier range. We actually have Mike Clay actually ranks Jeremy Chin below Taylor Rapp, as you can see on the right side of the screen. He has Jeremy Chin below Taylor Rapp there, which I thought was fairly an interesting ranking on the list. But if you look higher, Savage is toward the top. But do they go top end now? Do they go with like a Curl, maybe Xavier McKinney? Do they really think that they'll need to go as high as some of those players up there? Kevin Baird wasn't great. He has him ranked pretty high.
And he's kind of old now too.
Yeah, Diggs is interesting. He's been good at times, but he wasn't great last year. So what range do the Bills like? I mean, I personally like Eddie Jackson would be a player that's been really good. Tracy Walker. There's safeties there. I do believe the Bills sign one. So we'll see how good of one that they do sign here in the offseason. But how are you feeling now knowing that his vision may be to move to young players? Has that clicked for you yet? Or are you still thinking that they're going to go the cheaper, older vet route? How are you feeling now knowing that the Bills window has transitioned from window 1 to window 2?
I think I'm still processing it because, as I've said all night, it's bittersweet because this is legit the end of an era, but it's also the start of a new one. And that's really, really intriguing because as much as it stings, I'm just going to be blunt. It didn't work. We didn't win a Super Bowl with Jordan Poyer. We didn't win a Super Bowl with Mitch Morse. We didn't win a Super Bowl with Trey White. And these guys aren't getting any younger. So like that one comment that we had earlier tonight, sometimes you just got to rip the Band-Aid off and say, we got to do what's best for this team moving forward. So I think I'll get there. I will definitely be feeling more optimistic as we start to get some free agency signings coming in, because then you're really going to start to see the envision from Brandon Beane. Like right now, it doesn't make much sense. I'm kind of getting vibes to 2017 when he came to Buffalo and immediately traded Sammy Watkins and Ronald Darby. And I was like, who does this guy think he is? Just to come into our city and trade a couple of fan favorites. And then you start to understand his vision and you're like, oh, this makes sense. And the players that he got in return we got a lot of bang for our buck. Jordan Matthews kind of, tallied off. And then he had that infamous line about there's not much to do in Buffalo but each other. So we'll leave it at that. But you start to see how Brandon Beane was thinking. And that's when we started to gain a lot of respect for him. So I'm hoping that this is going to be a similar trajectory. And I saw someone on Twitter say today, was it you or was it someone else, Kevin, that said that, Poyer and Hyde were essentially nobodies. Micah Hyde was more known than Poyer at the time, but they came to Buffalo and rose to the occasion. They became studs in Buffalo. They weren't studs before. So now it's up to Brandon Beane to find 2 new safeties and then Sean McDermott and Bobby Babich to develop them into 2 future studs.
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, those were the day. The problem with this example, yes, that's a hard day. However, the Bills did end their era window in that scenario. I don't believe they're similar in this regards to where basically, essentially a drought had started very shortly near after that, beside the Music City Miracle. A roster drought had essentially started to begun. But I think the scenario is a little bit differently this time around. And please, everybody tell us, I'm projecting the Bills to have $40 million, possibly 50 with the extra 10 from Trey White coming on June 1st. So where does everybody want to spend this? We appreciate all 1,200 viewers here with us here today. Smash the like button from the Built in Buffalo Network. Really appreciate everybody. But Kevin, do you think that the Bills are going to try to add a lot of players? Because I think they're going to go quality now. And I think they're going to, instead of do the 1.7 million player, I think they're going to go get a tick above that situation. So do you think that Beane will change his philosophy? And then let's talk about for a quick second, maybe the defensive philosophy change too. like in terms of, going to Bobby Babbage Jr., they're going to be a little bit more aggressive, maybe play a little bit more man at times. Maybe there's a certain safety out there that can do that. And maybe that's what led to Rep being resigned and then possibly targeting a different style of safety, because you're right. Like when Hyde came over, he was a nickel corner for many snaps. So the Bills obviously, we're going to use Taron Johnson in that role early on, and then we're going to transition him to a full-time safety. But I think the Bills, if McDermott, hate him, love him, medium on him, it doesn't matter. If he does one thing, it is know how to use and find DBs. And the Bills have one big hole at the safety position, one other being Rap. I think that the Bills are going to designate from this huge pool of free agency and this huge, nice pool of rookies is why the Bills were able to move on from safety. So I feel pretty confident in their ability to find the new style of defensive safety that they're looking for in this system. When you do have a player like Josh Allen, though, like the era is never closed. So that's why window 2 is open. And you look across the board and you have 8 players on rookie deals playing on this team, and you have 11 draft picks coming in. So you have almost 20 players near rookie deals that are going to be playing for the Buffalo Bills at a reasonable, solid rate, on top of some of your studs and stars like Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs, Matt Milano, Ed Oliver, and more. So that is an interesting topic to bring up. And you got a tight end too. You have 2 good tight ends. And then you have, 0 behind that. So will the Bills add a developmental tight end too? I don't know. They love to run a lot of different schemes. I think that that's possible, that the Bills could look for a 5th, 6th round tight end that possibly is a guy that they can play behind Knox. Maybe we'll see what they do with Dawson Knox in general. What do you do with Dawson Knox? We didn't talk about tight end at all because Kincaid's such an obvious, but Knox is an interesting topic and we didn't touch on it. What do you want from Dawson Knox this season? And in general, like, what are you thinking when it comes to him? Because he's an interesting player.
I mean, are we past the point of him getting released? Like, do you think he would have been in that slew today?
His contract, it doesn't allow him to be cut. You would owe him $20 million to cut him. There's no way out of his contract.
Okay. Yeah, because there's a lot of guarantees, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm fine with Dawson Knox. Like, I don't want to lose another core piece here. So I think as long as you can make it work, I mean, we saw it last year with him and Kincaid. I liked what they did together. Now, can you restructure Knox's deal at all, or is it too hard based on that?
You can, because he's owed a $5 million base salary this season. So you can do that. And here's the kicker, Kevin. So we're not done with him yet. He's owed $5 million a roster bonus on March 17th. So in exactly 11 days, you have to pay him $5 million on a roster bonus. So he has a $5 million base and a $5 million roster bonus. So you can take that $10 million and obviously spread it out over the term of 3 years, or which would technically be a restructure. So, we have someone wanting to restructure Knox. That's tough because you're kicking money. Or do you redo his deal? So that's interesting. So they have to do something with him because he's owed $5 million here in 11 days. So that makes it a little bit tricky. I just don't think, unless you can get someone that basically is a trade trigger. Can you get somebody to trade for him? Maybe the Bills decide that a 4th round pick's worth it. But what are your thoughts?
Well, I want Dawson Knox on the team, so I guess I would be more in favor of restructuring him then. I mean, I guess you'd have to kick the money down, kick the can down the road a little bit, kick his money down. But I like what him and Kincaid did together last year, and I think he has a niche. I think he has a nice role on this team. And to your point, that it makes more sense to rework his deal than it does to just outright cut him. And I don't really want to trade him. So, yeah, I guess I would just say try to rework his deal, even if that means pushing it down the road a little bit.
Yeah, and what's interesting about that roster bonus is so to clarify that, it actually guaranteed this time last year. So he's guaranteed that. You can't cut him and get out of that roster bonus. He's been guaranteed it. It's just not paid yet. So that's the interesting part if the Bills will do something with his contract, because it's structured in a way that that $5 million he gets paid. And then what happens with a roster bonus, it's just like a restructure that we talk about on here. It's just like a signing bonus that Von Miller got today. That's $5 million in cash, and it gets spread between this year, next year, and the year prior. So that will then get spread out over the remaining portion of his deal, which is this year and 2 more. So that will get spread out, thus reducing his cap hit a little bit once that pay is made. A lot of people haven't looked at Dawson Knox's contract because if you just kind of glance at it on Spot Track, it just looks like, okay, cap hit of 14 million, dead cap of 20 million. That roster bonus, that $5 million that's sitting there, is actually going to spread out. So you're actually going to save money by virtue of on the day that payment is made. It's already been guaranteed by last year, but it hasn't been paid yet. So by virtue of that $5 million going into his bank account again, we know what happens. Once you do that, it triggers the 3-year spread out. So in theory, the Bills like have more of a benefit to kind of trading him later on in the scenario than they do releasing him. They can save like a few $1 million and get a draft pick. Not something I'd love to do, but they could do it. And if you trade him post June 1st, like they did with Trey White, you could actually, save $4 million this year, or about 10 million this year, but you're going to have about 8 million of dead cap next year on him. So there's a couple options with Knox. I like him. I'm a Dawson Knox fan. Like, I'm just going to be honest. Like, he's one of my favorite players. I don't think he had a very good year. I was pissed off a lot of the time at some of his play. But I think that he has it. That wrist injury wasn't great. It was part of the reason, but I thought he came back and was fairly effective. And that allows you to do more with Kincaid. And a full year with Kincaid and Knox is what you're looking. You're looking for a full year with Knox and Kincaid where they're healthy in a Brady offense. That is absolutely what you're looking for. And I think you've made enough moves, and you didn't kick any money down the road, really. So that's to remember. They haven't really kicked much down the road. What will they do with Knox? He's an interesting one, and one that I really only see being moved for a day 2 pick. Someone offers you a 3rd round pick and you save a couple million, you probably pull the trigger on that. But he's going to be one to follow very closely because that $5 million, when you pay him that in cash, it's going to spread out over this year and 2 more years. It's going to trigger to me, once that cash is made by Pagula, that it's his to stay unless someone gives you a big deal. But we bring up our free agency wish list once more. Let's start with you, Kevin. Where does your free agency wish list kind of end up?
Well, as we wrap up our show tonight, I want to spend some time here because this is what we came up with a couple weeks ago. And we were planning on having this be like our final wish list mixed in with all of our cuts and restructures and extensions. And obviously we had a lot of wrinkles thrown into that today. So I want to spend some time asking you, Kevin, and then I want to hear from our chat as well. How many of these are realistic? Because I still agree with a lot of the players who we targeted, but based on the money now, can we do a little bit better? Can we get a tick above? Because let's take someone like Yetur Gross-Matos. I think that is a very good signing right there. If you can get him, you pair him with AJ Epinesa. So you have Von Miller and Greg Rousseau as your defensive ends 1 and 2. And then you have Gross-Matos and Epinesa, who I believe are both still peaking in this league. They both haven't hit their ceilings yet as your defensive ends 3 and 4. So, I mean, like we said that the Bills could get him for an AAV or a cap hit of about $3.5 million. So, like, do you still agree with that? Or do you think that now they can go get someone better? Or maybe this is just simply because they want to get Gross-Matos, but his market value might even be higher than what we projected it to be.
The benefit of today, now we heard the hard part was we talked about it earlier on the front of the show, and we appreciate all of our on-demand listeners. Please smash the like button, whether you're on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, wherever you are. Smash that like button. It means a ton to us. Please follow us on YouTube. If you're watching on Facebook, please head up over to YouTube and smash the follow button there and subscribe. It helps us, bring extra content to you as well. If you're watching on Twitter, please do the same to the Built in Buffalo Network as well. But as we talked about earlier, and to all of our Spotify listeners too, please leave us 5 stars on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. That'd be awesome. We talked about like the hard parts of this, but the good parts of this situation are that the Bills have more money to spend. I do think, so let's go back to our wish list, original wish list prior to today. I do think that each of these players, so like Locke and Edwards, so Locke is going to be, Trubisky, Edwards is Edwards. But I think each of the remaining players, I think that you can take a tick above most of those guys. I think that we're already factoring in or go for one really high-end guy and then the rest, this list. But I think for the most part, you can go a tick above pretty much most players on this list. So, maybe you do bring back Epinesa, and then you can upgrade Gross Matos with, maybe a tick above that. Maybe in a situation where you're looking at, like, I don't know, could you go for a Shaquille Barrett or, Zadarius Smith even? And in the interior spot, do you go all the way up to Christian Wilkins? So my wish list has changed. My wish list is try to get a top end receiver. If you can't, and it's crazy, I don't really want one. I truthfully don't need to give him snaps. You have Justin Shorter waiting in the wings. You have two other guys that are going to get a lot of playing time in Diggs and Shakir. Go get a low end guy. Go pick up whatever you think may be able to do something for you a little bit. Give Josh Reynolds a try. I don't mean to call him low end, but get a more low end type of guy, and then go get two rookies. Like, seriously, get two rookies on a rookie deal with this loaded draft class. And then I'm pivoting my money. I'm literally pivoting my money to defensive tackle. I am merging what I thought they may pay a situation with Daquan Jones and Greg Gaines or something. And I'm doing whatever I can to score a top end interior defensive lineman to pair. Is it DJ Reader? Is it you go all the way up to Christian Wilkins or Leonard Williams? That is what I do. That is my free agent current wish list, is getting a top interior D lineman to pair with Ed Oliver, because the interior pressure against these top end quarterbacks with our linebacking core is what I think the Bills need to do. Especially if you can't get in touch with a higher end receiver, I'm going to put all my money that I've just saved by cutting some old players, and I'm going after a young interior defensive lineman. What are you thinking? And then I'm probably staying the par on the rest of our players, because I'm probably going to sink my money into like getting after these premier quarterbacks. So where are you at now with the changes to your wish list?
Well, let's look. So, like you said, Drew Lock became Trubisky. Edwards is Edwards. I still like Deontay Foreman for that price, so I'm going to stay there. Wide receiver, though, you said Tyler Boyd. I had Noah Brown. We had similar price ranges. I'm going to go a few $1 million above and say I'm willing to spend, 10 to 12 million on Hollywood Brown. I don't know if he's going to cost that much, but I'm just saying, if you have to go above that $7 million that we set, then I'm okay with that now. Now, defensive tackle is interesting, because I still think that I would want Daquan back along with Greg Gaines for those contracts, or those cap hits at least, because them together will still be a lot cheaper than someone like Christian Wilkins. And I know Wilkins is great, but I'm thinking that Beane's going to want to draft a defensive tackle. And I think you can get the same amount of production between Jones and Gaines that you can with Wilkins for about $10 million less. So, I mean, like, to our conversation earlier, like, I agree. I think that is pretty juicy now, thinking about the money that we could spend and try to allocate our sources that way. But I think I'm still going to stay with Greg Gaines and Daquan Jones. But again, I would not be shocked or even upset if he wanted to go get like a DJ Reader or Christian Wilkins, Leonard Williams. We already talked about Gross Matos. I will stay there for now, but like, if they can get Jadeveon Clowney, Jonathan Greenard, one of those guys in that $7 to $10 million range, then okay, do it. I definitely want AJ Epinesa back, as I've already said. Troy Reader, I think he's a solid third or fourth linebacker that you can pair behind Terrell Bernard and Matt Milano. You can pair him with Dorian Williams, because I think he has an inside-outside versatility that him and Williams would play off of each other very well. And he's a former Ram, so he has a lot of familiarity with some of these players on the Bills defense. And then safety, I mean, I don't know, because Jeremy Chin, I've seen his market value go anywhere from 6 to 16 million. So maybe that's like a perfect example where Jeremy Chin is going to be more expensive than maybe Beane was thinking. And now you can put that money there, and you don't have to feel as bad about giving him an AAV of $10 million per year. I think Quandre Diggs is interesting too. There are a couple other guys that were on that list where I was like, okay, maybe the Bills can sink a little bit more money into this now, where we don't have to feel as bad. But I'm thinking that I would probably go above that $3 million cap hit now that we had given to Darnell Savage. And let's just say it's, 8 to 10 for Jeremy Chin. Okay.
Yeah, I think the thing about Chin is like, I think his natural player position would have been somewhere where Rapp would be. So I think they may be looking more at like a free safety style of position. It's not to say they couldn't player match like that. I just think like a Savage would make a little bit more sense, or another player, especially now with the Rapp being back and getting a decent sized deal, that I think they may go more of the traditional free safety look, and a Xavier McKinney style, the Savage, even a Jordan Whitehead really makes sense. Geno Stone, there's a couple names there that could fit the bill for the Bills, depending on what they're looking for. But I think, yeah, linebacker, absolutely. We have them adding Troy Reeder, and I think that it's possible they'll entertain a draft pick there. Maybe it's the end of the third, as they've been doing for back-to-back seasons. But it's a position that the Bills need to think about. And they have thought about it. They have Bernard and Dorian Williams, and as well as Balin Spector. So they have thought about it. They have sunk some rookie assets into it. All three of them being players that, look, you would have saw in the playoffs against Patrick Mahomes. You would have saw Spector had he not got hurt. So it's very they like those three young guys a whole lot. So they do have them in the pipeline. Do they add someone else? Maybe, but I think they more add like a Reader. But sure, nothing's going to stop them if they like a linebacker in the fourth or fifth. Of course, they're going to add them to continue that depth, especially if they lose Dodson. So it's a fair thing, but I think they're going to more replace that with a linebacker style there. But look, Kevin, we need to add money somewhere. For me, it's defensive tackle. I think for you, you're thinking receiver, I guess.
Yeah, I think for me, it sounds like for you, you're willing to like put that money into a specific position. And I think I'm going to take that. Let's just say we have an extra 10 to $15 million that we didn't think that we're going to have, maybe even 10 to 20. And I'm going to spread that out between wide receiver, safety, and defensive line. So I don't want to go after like one specific player and say, oh, now we have an extra 20 million to go get Christian Wilkins. It's just a simple matter of, okay, maybe we can get an upgrade over Noah Brown and get Hollywood Brown. And maybe now we can get Jeremy Chin instead of Darnell Savage. And maybe now we can get Yatur Gross Matos at a better rate than what we had originally planned on. Something like that. So I think I'm just trying to spread it out a little bit more rather than going after one specific position.
Yeah, Chin's an interesting one too, because not just from the player perspective of like, I'm not sure if they're going to double down with Rapp, but more from a positional standpoint of like, if you look through like, okay, so let's use PFF and I'm going to use over the cap, two places that use whatever their data is to drive this. They project Chin at $1 for $3 million. So
yeah,
that's
see, like
interesting.
His market values have been all over the place. Like some networks and websites think that he's going to get paid, and then others don't.
Yeah, another name that we haven't brought up on the show that is fairly high ranked on a lot of boards, including Mike Clay's that I brought up, was Gilman, the safety from the Chargers. He's a guy that was really good this year, one of the best players on the Chargers defense that most people don't know about. I think Mike Clay had him the second best free agent safety, maybe. So he's a guy that I don't know how much he's going to cost, maybe in the $5 million range. Yeah, number two. But Gilman is a very interesting name to consider here for the Bills. CJ Gardner-Johnson's a guy I really like. He's been good at stretches, can do a lot of different things, plays physical, and he's fast. He's still reasonably priced, and he's still 26. So CJ Gardner-Johnson's definitely a guy I like. Jordan Whitehead's only 26. You feel like Jordan Whitehead's been around forever. He's just been good in the Jets, including the season opener where he nabbed Josh a few times to secure the win for the Jets. So Jordan Whitehead could be an interesting target. You have Jordan Fuller, ball hawking free safety. So we talked about, maybe needing more of the ball hawk style, especially with Rapp in there. So he times the ball super well, really good in coverage, projected to get 2 years, $5 million a year for Jordan Fuller, so that he can be utilized there. And then a cover three style safety, they could go to Julian Blackmon. The Bills were in cover three when they lost to Travis Kelce in the playoffs. They could want a guy that's seasoned in cover three. It could be a Julian Blackmon in the same range as Jordan Fuller, played a lot of corner as well, can play in the slot, can do a lot of different things. So he'd be an interesting addition. Geno Stone's one of the best coverage safeties in the league. Misses some tackles, so I'm sure we'd hear about that. But his ability to cover, man, like that's what I care about. And that's going to be an interesting player move for me there. So I really enjoy watching him play at times. definitely prior to his injury. You have Xavier McKinney, another player that can play a free safety or in the box. The Bills might love that versatility. I'd love to get a hold of Xavier McKinney. I thought he was one of the better players on the Giants defense. And Cameron Curl can do literally everything. So if the Bills are looking to spend at the top end of the safety room, you're talking McKinney, you're talking Cameron Curl. So those are some names that are fairly well, have a fair good pedigree that I don't know how much would cost. But then you have Kyle Duggar, but the Patriots put the transition tag on him. So unfortunately, he's going to be a guy that is probably going to detract most people. The transition tag's weirder. You're not guaranteed as much, but it's a weird kind of unit. And then obviously Antoine Winfield Jr. But they franchised him. So those are some of the higher end safeties. But I think that Stone, McKinney, Curl, Julian Blackman, Jordan Fuller, Jordan Whitehead, CJ Gardner-Johnson, those are definitely some names that may be a tick above what we were projecting. So with Poyer out of the mix, I think it's fairly possible. And then Calvin Ridley, yeah, sure, he's the fruit of the class. So what are your thoughts? What are your takes on Calvin Ridley?
I was going to say, so Calvin Ridley is also intriguing because I think he fits this offense perfectly. But does he, if the Bills were potentially going to sign him and say, oh, we have extra money to go sign Calvin Ridley now, does that potentially sway them away from taking a wide receiver in round one and then drafting defense? That's my only concern.
It would.
Two concerns are the money. I mean, he might want upwards of $20 million, and I think that's way too for my blood. But if you take Calvin Ridley in free agency, would you still want to draft someone like a Brian Thomas Jr.? And then they might fall into the trap of going with an edge rusher again in round one. So that's my concern about Calvin Ridley. And I think Marquise Brown would be a nice happy medium between Noah Brown and then Calvin Ridley. You might be able to go right in the middle here with Marquise Brown. He could be your wide receiver 4, Shakir's wide receiver 3, and then you don't feel like you're pigeonholing yourself, and you can still put that capital into that round one wide receiver. So it's just very, I've been saying interesting all night, or intriguing, fascinating, but it's really, that's what it is. It's cool to see how Brandon Beane puts this together, because as much as you want to get very infatuated with the player and say, oh, now we have money to go get Calvin Ridley, well, you also have to think about how that affects your draft, because if you want them to draft a wide receiver, signing Calvin Ridley might prohibit them from doing that.
Yeah, and if you're on Twitter, head on over to YouTube, make some comments. You can interact with us a little bit there. If you're over on Facebook and or X, when it comes to Rapp, he's played well. I don't think that contract's going to look nearly like it does on the agency side, or that is released to Schefter on the 14.5 million. I do think he's going to take that strong safety spots and in the box when needed. But I can't talk enough about how well Leonard Williams has played in his career. They're projecting him for 3 years, $17 million a year. That's 6'5", 305. He's been good the majority of his career. I just really would like to see what he could do in this defense. I think he could be a really solid fit. He had his best pass rushing year that he's ever had. He had a pressure rate over 10%. He does a lot of different things. And I think that next to Ed Oliver and this potential defense, love to see what he could do, especially with the newfound money, especially if obviously you can't get to the top end. Matabuke was franchised. Chris Jones and Christian Wilkins may just cost too much money. The next couple of guys are Leonard Williams and DJ Reader. And I would entertain either of them. I think they're both studs. I think DJ Reader's an absolute stud too, 6'3", 335. He suffered an injury in week 15 last year, but so you might be able to even get him for a deal. He's in his 20s still. He's as stout as they come, doing whatever he needs to do. So he's just kind of a little bit younger version of Daquan Jones. So we'll see if the Bills do say that is a position they want to target a couple of years younger, get a couple of years younger there. And there's guys like Grover Stewart, who's always been solid in his career. So he's a guy to really watch out for too. 6'4", 314. He takes on double teams and clogs up the middle as good as anybody. He frees up those rushers around him, and the Bills love that. He's 30 himself though, but he is another guy to watch out for in that front. But A lot of good interior guys. So I think the Bills definitely want to see what Monday brings. So free agency starts Monday for the tampering window. So we'll see where they target. And then obviously it goes live on Wednesday. We'll be here again for a free agency show next Wednesday at 7. But Kevin, bring us home. We really appreciate everybody tuning in for 2 hours. We appreciate all 1,200 viewers throughout our show. I do think there's a chance Shaq Lawson comes back from what I've been told, but nothing yet. He's definitely going to be a guy that Brandon Beane gives his standard $1.5 million to come middle to late March. So Kevin, bring us home. What's on your mind? What are you thinking? How to wrap the day for us?
Well, I have a question for you first, and then I want to hear from the chat as well. So if it came down to it, who would you rather have? Leonard Williams, Christian Wilkins, DJ Reader, one of those guys, or Daquan Jones? And then part two, who would you rather have re-signed, Daquan Jones or AJ Epinesa?
I'd rather have a top guy. I think they freed up enough money and they can get a little younger there. We don't know how that's going to look if Daquan Jones can continue to play at his 33-year-old age, going to be 34 soon. And I would pick Epinesa. He's younger. He fits the mold of window too. So for me, it would be a pairing of Epinesa and probably definitely Christian Wilkins, obviously. But if I can get Leonard Williams or DJ Reader, I would do a pair of Williams and Reader and AJ Epinesa to kind of retool that D-line. And then equally so, that takes the pressure off of D-line. So, obviously you could go with the rookie defensive tackle spot, but it would take the pressure off of D-line in the draft and really have you focus on your true new 5-year receiver too. And I think that's the position that most people want to be in, is truly finding that receiver 2, future receiver 1, and get him for 5 years over continuing drafting defensive line. And they say Tavondre Sweat, what he's supposed to be is DJ Reader. So yes, you would get him for a little bit cheaper and a little bit younger, but you could always score the DJ Reader and get his best. I mean, he's super good, DJ Reader. He's the reason that the Bengals are able to beat. He's part of the reason the Bengals are able to beat the Chiefs when it matters the most, because you look at some of the Bengals offensive numbers and it's not them. It's definitely what he's able to do there. So you could get him and then get a receiver 2 in the draft and get one without having a ton of pressure of knowing that you still need defensive linemen. So I guess where do you fit on those decisions?
Yeah, I mean, I think I still want Daquan back, but to your point, I do want to see the Bills spend more on the defensive side in free agency now, because I said a few minutes ago that if the Bills have, let's just say, $15 to $20 million extra to work with that we weren't accounting for, you're willing to put that into one or maybe 2 positions on the defensive line. And I was saying, well, I kind of want to spread that out, put a little bit more into wide receiver, get a tick above a Noah Brown, put a little bit more into safety. If you have to overpay Jeremy Chin a little bit, then do it, and not necessarily overpay. And you mentioned a bunch of other names that could work. I think Cameron Curl could be interesting. Jordan Whitehead, maybe Darnell Savage is a little bit too low now based on that bar. And then same with defensive line, put a little bit more money into that. And I think when it's all said and done, I want them to put a little bit more money into the defense so that they can still draft offense, specifically a wide receiver in the first round.
Absolutely. So there you have it, guys. We really appreciate everybody tuning in. Smash that like button. We went extra today due to the nature of what went down. And hopefully next week when we come live for you Wednesday at 7 on free agency day, we can recap the free agency signings that have happened, as well as break down what the Bills need to do going forward. Maybe get some more news and restructures. Maybe get some news that breaks, trades, whatever that may happen here live on the show next Wednesday at 7. So don't miss out on that. For all of our X watchers, thank you so much for tuning in on X. That is very appreciative. We got the basement going live Friday with their information. So check out the basement on Fridays. We got the Hoof tomorrow on Thursdays as well. So we're going to keep bringing you the action here on Built in Buffalo and to all 1,300 live viewers. We really appreciate every single one of you. Please smash a like button somewhere. That means a lot to us. And you can catch all of our stuff and all of our action on the Going Deep Buffalo podcast account, as well as Kevin and myself, and as well as the Built in Buffalo network. So we really hope we brought some clarity, some levity, some real cathartic discussion about, yes, there's some windows closing, but the Bills have, let's recap, possibly 40 to 50 million, 8 players on rookie deals that are contributors, and 11 draft choices. So there is a lot to be in Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs. So there's a lot to be excited about for this window.
And one last thing that I would like to say, the Kansas City Chiefs keep winning Super Bowls, and that is because they keep getting younger. And they are relying on their coaching staff to continue to draft and develop, and then they try to re-sign those players. So I think if the Bills want to finally take that next step and beat the Chiefs, then they had to do what they did today. And that's not to say that every single move is going to work out perfectly. You know, maybe it would have worked out if they would have kept one or two of those guys between Mitch Morse or Jordan Poyer. But I think in general, I think the Bills had to get younger, and they're going to have to learn how to play with a younger group of talent to get over the hump.
Absolutely. And we'll bring you all the cap knowledge we have. I brought as much as I had. I got some stuff right. So luckily, we have just as good of cap coverage as anywhere. So make sure you tune into us too, breaking down all the players and prospects. We're going to get into draft talk soon, but we have still another free agency show, probably wrap up free agency show. And then as come late March, we're definitely going to pivot to our favorite draft picks and what is needed now after free agency. So there's going to be a ton of shows coming up. The Built in Buffalo lineups dropping, a lot of good talent. We have the Hoof come tomorrow on one of their first shows. We have the Basement on Friday. We got the Blitz on Tuesday. So there's definitely a lot of good shows that you can tune into throughout the weeks, and continuing to give you live coverage every single day. Like this is something we're going to bring you live draft coverage too, like we did, like we're traditionally done. So everybody tuning in, where to catch us. Go like us, go subscribe on YouTube. Helps us a ton. You can catch us right here, 7:00 on Wednesdays. We're going to bring you everything that we have. Data during the season. We're going to be bringing you free agencies as well. We're going to be bringing you all of our draft takes and more. We really appreciate everybody. But for now, that's going to be a cap on the Going Deep Buffalo podcast show on the Built in Buffalo podcast network. We'll be with you soon. Be back here next Wednesday at 7, and we'll discuss some of the things that happened, and we'll recap some of the free agents that the Bills probably have signed at that point, and see where they end up with money. So Kevin and Kevin will be back at you next Wednesday at 7.